Welcome into Always the Jags. It is your host, King Whale, and today we are talking about my 7 round mock draft. First, I want to apologize. I know I haven't been on here in a while. I feel like that loss to the Titans, I know it was forever ago, but it still like haunted me, and I couldn't bring myself to talk. I couldn't bring myself to do anything because I was just so horrified by what happened. Um, but now we have the draft. We did right after free agency. And I'm gonna do a free agency breakdown. I really should have done like what I thought we needed in free agency, but based upon the holes that we were gonna have, the cap space that we were gonna have, and the guys we needed to fill, I didn't even know how to approach free agency this past year. However, I think Trent Baalke did an excellent job of going into free agency and figuring out what he needed based upon the guys that he was going to release. So I think he deserves a masterclass because he did a lot of really great things that I think are going to ultimately help our team. For example, choosing Eric Armstead over Calvin Ridley, because if we paid Calvin Ridley what the Titans gave him, we couldn't have gotten Armstead. I would have taken Armstead, that defensive tackle, over Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be much more helpful to our team and what we're trying to do. And I think you can get a Calvin Ridley kind of guy in the second round of the draft, which we'll see in the mock draft. I don't think we would have been able to do that with Eric Armstead, right? I don't think we'll be able to get a guy that'll have that same impact on our team. So let's go ahead and dive right in. In the first round, I have us taking Quinyon Mitchell at number 17. And Quinyon Mitchell is he really is that guy. I mean, he's that cornerback from Toledo, and people are really excited and think that he could definitely become a cornerback one, which is exactly what our team needs. Because Tyson Campbell, he's good, don't get me wrong, and I really like him, and he's played cornerback one very well. I think after his injury, he was never the same, and I think he was always going to be kind of a mid-tier cornerback one. I think if we can move him to cornerback two and pay him, extend him like he's a cornerback two, I think Tyson Campbell can be dominant. Absolutely dominant. So if a guy like, and that's why I really want a guy like Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold, because Terrion Arnold would work as well. Um, Either one would be a great cornerback one for us. But because Tyson Campbell he got hurt last season, um, it made it really hard for us to. And look at that pick. Like that's Quinyon Mitchell. He's got the measurables. He's got the all the traits that you need for a cornerback one. And the best part is he doesn't have to step in and be QB and be CB1 right away, right? Like Ryan Nielsen can take his time. Tyson Campbell has experience playing the number one cornerback, and he can do that for the next couple of games, maybe halfway through the season, and just see, and then let Mitchell slowly take over, maybe halfway, or when we get towards the playoffs or something like that, something to allow Quinyon Mitchell to eventually step into the light, and so that way we know like he is our guy because he is that guy. He's a ball hawk. He gets interceptions, and and I like him and Quinyon Mitchell, and he's really good in zone coverage. I think he can play press man as well, but the fact that he's good in zone coverage, because the Jaguars had to play a lot of zone last year because we didn't have the personnel to play man. Now I know Ryan Nielsen really likes press man coverage. However, if our guys like, Trey Herndon couldn't play press man. Antonio Johnson, I think, will be better as a nickel. Darnell Savage, I think he might be a better guy who can play press man. And so, if Ryan Nielsen feels like we have the kind of guys that can do it, I don't know if Tyson Campbell can play press man. I just know that's what Nielsen likes to do. If he feels like we have the guys that can do it, then we'll play a lot of press man. And maybe Terrion Arnold is a better pick for us because he excels in that. And that might be something we'll look into. But because these are the top two cornerbacks in the draft, it may not be up to us. You know what I mean? It would, because Mitchell might go before Terry and Arnold. And I think Mitchell has like the traits that everybody likes, and like he has more potential, I think, than Terry and Arnold. Like if they both reach their ceiling, I think Mitchell's ceiling is higher, but I also think that Terry and Arnold's floor is safer. So either pick here would be a win for us, I think. In this mock draft that I did, I just ended up getting Quinyon Mitchell at 17, and I was very happy. In my first round mock draft, I talked about more about what we might need to do to make sure that we get him, and whether that's if the Broncos or the Raiders take Arnold or Mitchell, which they are a threat to do, we might have to either try to trade up with the Raiders to get to that spot to maybe get Mitchell, or more likely try to trade up with the Saints. I'd offer him like a fourth rounder or something like that. Maybe a third rounder. I'd be hesitant to give one up just to go up a couple of spots to get him. But again, to me, the drop off between Mitchell and Arnold is very, very prevalent for cornerback one status. And I think a lot of people still think that Tyson Campbell is our cornerback one and he can be that. And I think so too. I just think if you have a chance to take some of the pressure off of him, because to me, like the very pivotal moment in our season, when our season pretty much kind of ended last year, was when we were playing against the Bengals. It was 3rd and 10. The Bengals were not in field goal range, and it was an excellent opportunity. If our defense got the stop, we would have taken over. Trevor Lawrence was on a heater, and we could have gotten a field goal and ended the game. We got a touchdown, ended the game. And it was 3rd and 10. And, Jake Browning is the cornerback, which, again, I don't know how he shredded us, but I think that's one of the reasons why um, not Mike McDaniel, Mike, our Mike Caldwell is no longer here. But basically, it was just 3rd and 10, and Tyson Campbell was lined up against T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins is the number one receiver on most teams in the NFL. On the Bengals, he's a very good number two. And he ran a route, planted his foot in the ground, turned the other direction, and converted a pass for 12 yards. Boom. Bengals get a new fresh set of downs. And that was the dagger. Because 3rd and 10 was that was the situation. That's the situation that every defense wants. That's the time where you put in your pass rushers. You know they can't run. You know it's going to be a pass. And they have to get a guy outside to get that pass. Like, it's going to be hard to hit it over the middle with our linebackers clogging it. It was the perfect situation to get off the field, and we couldn't do it. And to me, and again, Tyson Campbell had been hurt, and so it was hard, to really judge him on how well he did all year. And I think whether he's hurt or not, he's always going to be a mid-tier cute cornerback one. He's not going to be one of the elite cornerback ones. He's always going to be mid-tier, whether he's healthy or not. But again, if he's able to play cornerback two, he will be dominant, the best cornerback two in the NFL, hands down. So I think that's why I would love to take Quinyon Mitchell at number 17. If Brian Thomas Jr. is there, just based upon, well, I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to the second round. So now let's move on to the second round. So first round, we have Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, cornerback. Hopefully we'll take over that cornerback one position from Tyson Campbell. Next, we are going to South Carolina for our second pick. And here is where I'm going to take Xavier Legate, the wide receiver out of South Carolina. I was talking to my friend because I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my friend is a huge Panthers fan, huge Panthers fan. And he was talking about how badly the Panthers want him. I think a lot of teams want him because he's the guy that kind of screams like AJ Brown, T. Higgins, almost Michael Pittman potential, guys that you could take at the top of the second round that have the chance to blossom into that wide receiver one just because of the way he's built. And so Xavier Legate, he's one of those guys he's a contested catch guy, first of all. And he's got some nice speed on him too. Um, because he's a contested catch guy and because he can run any route that you need to on the field, I think he'll end up fitting Doug Peterson's scheme like a glove because this guy, he's got the hands, like I said, he's got the measurables. And I think he's the guy that can kind of play that. We always go back to the Eagles because that's when Doug Peterson's offense was one of the best ones. That's what got him, the head coaching gig in Jacksonville after winning Super Bowl with that offense. And he can play that big body Alshon Jeffrey role, right? Like when Trevor Lawrence is in trouble, his first and second reads aren't there. Xavier Legate, if he's one-on-one or it looks like a contested catch situation, this is a guy he can count on to do it. So you can throw the ball to him, just put it up and let him go make a play because we need that. We need a guy that even if he's not open, he can be open. A guy that kind of needs to be double teamed. You can't really leave him in single coverage. And if they start having a double team leg eight, well, we still have Evan Ingram, we still have Christian Kirk, and we still have Gabe Davis on the other side who can make those kind of catches as well. So I think, oh, like that's the beauty of the catch right there. Went up over the defender and brought it down. Because I think Calvin Ridley is a great route runner, but I don't think he created as much separation as we thought he was going to, right? And Trevor Lawrence, he likes the separation. He likes to throw to guys who are open. He's not exactly a tight throw window thrower. But with Xavier Legate, because he doesn't get a whole lot of separation on these routes as you're watching these highlights. Sometimes he'll run just by a guy, but there's not as many times when he's just like wide open. Like Christian Kirk is a route runner who gets wide open. He'll see the soft spot in the zone and he'll adjust his route and he will make sure that he gets wide open. Trevor will be throwing it to him, and there's nobody within 5 or 10 yards of him because he's that good at that. Calvin Ridley, he would always be covered. And I don't know if it was speed, route running, or just the ability to change direction. Like I said, Calvin Ridley's a great route runner, but he didn't always create that same separation, and he's not a contested catch guy. Like if you don't create separation, you got to be a contested catch guy. I got to know when I put the ball up, you're going to come down with it. Calvin Ridley isn't like that. Xavier Legate, though, is. Look at him go up and get that. That's the kind of guy that you need because again, and he won't create a whole lot of separation. Maybe Doug won't want him in the scheme for that, but I believe that his comp is Alshon Jeffrey, AJ Brown, T Higgins, and those are guys that you want on the team. Now, here at 48 with the number 48 pick, I could see us just trading it straight up to the Bengals or the 49ers for T Higgins or Brandon Ayuk. Maybe even do a second this year and a second next year. I wouldn't feel terrible about. However, um, I would not give up a first for either of those two wide receivers. They're great guys. I feel like if we didn't have as many needs, like maybe if there was a situation where the 49ers wanted to trade up to 17 and we got 31 and then they got our second round pick, we could do that potentially to get Brandon Ayuk. But I also don't we need too many guys. And I hate to start drafting for need and stuff, but that's how the NFL works. The NFL is built for parity and you can't just ignore other needs so you can go get that flashy guy or something like that. I see a lot of things that want us to take an offensive lineman in the first and second round. And I agree that would be great. Because I kind of want to beef up that offensive line as well. But again, in the NFL, the way that it works, your first and second rounders, they're starters. At least they're projected to be. Like you kind of need them to step on the field from day one. Quinyon Mitchell is going to be expected to step on the field from day one. Xavier Legate, while he doesn't have to be the guy, he's going to have to be a guy on the field from day one. And so taking a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson in the first or second round or something like that, I wouldn't be terrible. I wouldn't be terribly upset about it. But the problem is we are just not good enough to be that team that takes guys in the first round and lets them develop. Like, the Ravens are that kind of team. The Chiefs are that kind of team. We had to let go of so many guys. We're not there. So if you want to draft an offensive lineman, okay, what's going to happen with your cornerback situation, right? Like we take an offensive lineman, that means teams are just going to be throwing on us all day. The reason why we lost that Bengals game, it was that 3rd and 10 play because Trevor was on a heater all game. Losing Christian Kirk really didn't help either, but it was that 3rd and 10 play. Who gave that up? The secondary. We lost that game. Had we won that game, we would have been in the playoffs. We lost by 3 points. And it was on a 3rd and 10 play where Tyson Campbell couldn't make up the ground against T. Higgins. And like you said, having another body in there, I don't know if Ronald Darby could have stopped that play. Maybe Quinyon Mitchell could have. Who knows until these guys get on the field. But especially with Darius Williams gone, you want to draft the best player available. I agree. But there's also a bit of a flaw with that logic too, because like we took Chad Muma 2 years ago after taking Devin Lloyd in the first round. And legitimately, you could make an argument that in the third round, Chad Muma was the best player available. You could make a compelling argument that he was. But we already had signed Foye Oluokun, love the extension of him, by the way, and signed Devin Lloyd and drafted Devin Lloyd. And so Devin Lloyd's going to be under control for the next 5 years. Foye Oluokun, he came in and his contract was set up to where he was going to be there for at least 2 years because it was a 3-year deal. So you had Chad Muma who was going to ride the bench for 2 or 3 years. and that's a third round pick. Third round picks are special are supposed to be turn into starters eventually, and eventually turn into starters or be like a role player, someone that can come in and do things. And Chad Muma came in and did things only because, but like the difference between him and Devin Lloyd playing, there wasn't much of a difference. Devin Lloyd was getting really confused because of his injury, agreed, but it wasn't like our defense took like this whole nother step when Chad Muma was there because he's not as fast. So it kind of it kind of is like a wasted pick. Like our team is not that different if Chad Muma is not on it. You know what I mean? And that's my point. So like you can draft for like, the best player on the field on the board is a quarterback. Well, we're not going to take a quarterback because we got Trevor Lawrence. You know what I mean? If the best player on the board is a running back, we're not going to take him because we have Travis Etienne. So, like, again, I do like the idea of drafting for best player available. But I think you also got to know what you need, what you want for the future, because you don't want to be blindsided and not have guys that can step up because you took a bunch of running backs because they were the best player on the board, where you took a bunch of wide receivers, even though you had enough wide receivers. You know what I mean? There's a balance to it, to both of them. So anyway, moving on to the third round, we're gonna go to out of Texas, and this is going to be Christian Jones. Christian Jones out of Texas is a tackle. And I think this will be a good pick for us as well because again, a lot of people want to attack. I would like to beef up the offensive line too. Don't get me wrong. Our biggest problem last year, I would say, was the offensive line because Trevor kept getting hit. Like, when I was looking at the Colts game that we almost lost, Grover Stewart and what was his name? Grover Stewart and why am I blanking out? He came from he's an all nope, I didn't think of it. Okay. Anyway, Grover Stewart and the other fantastic defensive tackle for the Colts, they were abusing the interior of our offensive line. Absolutely abusing. We found out pretty early in that game that Ben Barch is not the guy. We also found out that Luke Fortner is really not the guy. And Luke Fortner's kind of been the problem on our interior offensive line for pretty much the entire season. So I think that was kind of a nasty surprise that we had to go through as Jags fans. And I remember them talking about it, and it was hard to watch because our offensive line they were getting bullied, absolutely bullied. And so I completely understand the argument to want to beef it up. My only thing is, again, I'm not going to go tackle in the first round because I already have two tackles for the left and right spots, right? Like, and I honestly don't like, I kind of know why Cam Robinson is still on the roster, but at the same time, I really don't because he's good. But Walker Little, again, when Walker Little came in and played for Cam Robinson, that was the year that we went to the playoffs and beat the Chargers. So, like, there really wasn't much of a drop off from Walker Little to Cam Robinson. I think we only noticed it this year in the run game because at one point we were talking about Walker Little being our best offensive lineman, and we were trying him out at guard once we realized that Ben Barch couldn't do it. Um, but I think they noticed it just in the run game because I think Cam Robinson is better in the run game. And I think the year before Walker Little was just, Trevor was on that heater and I think Walker Little's pass protection is better and Cam Robinson is better in the run game. So, but you can't really have an offensive tackle who can't do both because you're not just going to like swap them out for each play. First of all, now the other team knows what you're doing. Second of all, that's not realistic. So that's why I think Christian Jones would be a good pick here at number 96. Um, he's a good tackle. He can play. I like him because he can play inside and out. So this also gives us some depth. So if Brandon Scherf, who gets hurt a lot, goes down, if Ezra Cleveland, who's still recovering from an injury, um, and I was kind of surprised that we extended him, but I guess it was a pretty good move to be shrewd for the future. But either way, if either of those guys go down with some kind of injury or something like that, we need a guy who's going to be able to step in and play. And that is Christian Jones because he protected well at Alabama. And it's nice because you can kind of make a decision in the offseason. Okay, do I want to re-sign Walker Little or do I want, Christian Jones to kind of take over that tackle spot? And throughout the season, throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, you can try to give him enough reps to make sure to see if he'll be ready. If Cam Robinson goes down, which I mean, based upon his injury history, he probably will because he got suspended and then he went down and then that last year he went down as well. So there'll be a chance for him to see if Christian Jones can play. And he can play right or left side. So if you want to move Anton Harrison to the left side, who I think is doing a great job holding down the right side, but and then next year's draft is probably when I would look to maybe taking a center or a guard or I mean you could go a tackle next year's offensive line as well. But I think Christian Jones could be the move here. Like I said, the Seahawks found a really good tackle in Abraham Lucas, found a bookend in the third round. So it's possible. I think the third round is a good spot for us. And again, we have the luxury of letting the guy develop. We don't have to throw him into the fire. He doesn't have to go up against TJ Watt, day one, like felt like or no, Chris Jones almost day one. Was yeah, day two, Anton Harrison, because they just lined Chris Jones on him too. And I think that's the thing too. It's like our offensive line was really bad last year because Anton Harrison was really bad for the first half of the season. And by the time he got better, our defense started falling off. So it was really hard to see exactly where the problem was because now he's very solid and a very good and probably the strength of our offensive line. Luke Fortner was just bad all year. So he couldn't block guys on his own, so he needed help from Brandon Sheriff or from Ben Barch. Well, Ben Barch couldn't block guys on his own, so he needed help, and so did Luke Fortner. So now that those guys have been replaced, I do feel much better about the offensive line this year than I did last year. Mitch Morch, I think, is going to do a great job in stabilizing it. Obviously, he's a band-aid. He's not the long-term solution, but it's enough to where we don't have to worry about it as much this year, and we can maybe take a look at it next year. Now, there is another option here too, because the next guy I want to take in the fourth round, Javon Solomon, I'd be okay with taking him in the third round because he's that good, and I think he might not be there. And then there's a player named Tanner Bortolini who I think is someone I think he usually plays center, but he's actually lined up at every spot along the offensive line. And he's still a very good center. And so that's kind of the guy that I kind of want in like the third or fourth round, someone who can line up anywhere and still be good. And then next year, we'll give them a chance to choose a position based upon where we need them to play and let them really get good at it and focus it on it. You know what I mean? Because again, we might get rid of Sheriff this year. After this year, we might need another guard and we might be able to pick up one here. And we may or may not have Walker Little and Cam Robinson next year. Because they're both, like I said, I think there's a good chance, Jags. If you're going to bring back Ezra Cleveland, why would you not bring back Walker Little? Walker Little is clearly better, but again, there's a chance that we don't. So anyway, moving on to the fourth round, we're going to talk about this next guy that I want to draft, and that is Javon Solomon. Javon Solomon, first of all, is a beast. He got 16 sacks last year. I'm going to repeat that in case anyone missed it. He got 16 sacks. 16 sacks. That is crazy production. Crazy production, especially out of college. So, he goes to Troy, and we took Trayvon Walker number one overall, and he had 6 sacks. Right, like this guy, Javon Solomon. Now, the big knock on him is that he's small. He's undersized for a defensive lineman for an edge player in the NFL, and that may not translate. Usually, where that doesn't translate is run support. So, kind of like, Unique Ngakoue has been bouncing around the league a lot because he's kind of a liability in run support. Same with Josh Uche is a guy. Well, he's with the Patriots right now, but he had like a 12 sack season one time, which is elite production. But when you're a liability in run support and teams know they can run right at you, you can't be a starter, right? And so Unique Ngakoue wants starter money, but he's only good for rotational third down depth chart pieces, same with Josh Uche, because if you're undersized, what that means is you might be able to get around the offensive lineman to get to the cornerback, but if they're running the ball, the offensive lineman is going to be able to blow you off of your spot, right? Like you need someone who can disrupt the offensive lineman who's blocking you, because when you're rushing the passer, you're just trying to get around the offensive lineman, and if you're smaller, still got strength, you can do that, right? But if the offensive linemen are coming towards you, if the offensive linemen are coming towards you, you're going to get blown off of the ball. You are just going to get blown off of the ball if you're undersized. So the whole point would be, okay, Javon Solomon, his role would be to go get the pack, go get the quarterback. So on obvious passing situations, that's when we put him in. So we won't need him in run blocking because again, you don't want a guy out there when you know the running back or the offense, even if the running back can like push him over. But when it's 3rd and 10, even offensive holding penalty makes it 1st and 20. Um, maybe if you stop the run, so like if you get an offensive holding penalty and now it's 1st and 20, if you bring in your run stoppers because some teams like to run it on first down, make sure that they can't get very much. Now it's maybe 2nd and 17, 2nd and 15. Um, Now here's a really intriguing spot to bring someone like that in because now you've got a long distance to go and they might try to make it up with 7 or 8 yards, but they know they can't run the ball again and risk it being 3rd and 13, right? If they only got 3 yards on the first play. So all of that kind of goes into it. And Javon Solomon, he's just like he's an ingredient, you know what I mean? So he's one of those guys like, ah, how do I even compare this? Pepper doesn't work on everything. You don't put pepper on like your cream cheese sandwich or whatever. But in the right situation, pepper might be exactly what you need. So this situation, Javon Solomon, he would come in on those plays, 3rd and 10. Look what I was talking about against the Bengals. You have to pass because if you run it, you're more than likely you're not going to get the 10 yards from running. And if you don't, now it's 4th down. Now you got to kick punt or kick the field goal. So 3rd and 10 situations is the perfect example of where Javon Solomon comes in. And just imagine this for a second, because we all saw how good Trayvon Walker was when he moved inside, because guards are not as big as offensive linemen, and Trayvon Walker can overwhelm guards. But the reason why we like him on the edge is because he sets the edge so well as well. So just imagine 3rd and 10, 3rd and long, even. It could be 3rd and 7, anything over than 3rd and 5. Eric Armstead lines up at nose tackle. We move Trayvon Walker. He does a stunt inside. Josh Allen is still on the other edge, being a boss. And now Javon Solomon, this guy who had 16 sacks last year, comes in, and all you got to do is get to the quarterback. No need to worry about stopping the run, nothing like that. Just go get to the quarterback. With Ryan Nielsen's scheme, that's the exact kind of third pass rusher that we need. And we still have Yasir Abdullah, and we still haven't seen what he can do and all that stuff, and maybe he'll be good. But like I said, if I'm looking at a guy who has 16 sats and the only knock on him, the only reason why he's falling down the board is because he's bad in run support, well, that's fine because our top two edge players are fantastic in run support and in setting the edge. The Tennessee game was a bad look for them because they did not set the edge very well in that game. However, overall, that's where they excel. So I'm taking Javon Solomon. And if I have to take him in the 3rd round, like if I notice that there are a lot of edge guys that are going, I may end up taking this guy, Tanner Bortolini. End up taking this guy, Tanner Bortolini, in the 4th round, in the spot where I would have taken Javon Solomon at 114, just because he could play center, so he could potentially take over for Mitch Morse in a couple of years or so. But he can also play all over the foundation, all over the formation, because he can play tackle, he can play guard. So really, whenever you need someone to just come in, that would be the kind of guy. And he could take over at center, because some guys can play. There's a lot of centers that can play guard and tackle. There's not a lot of guards and tackles that can play center. Not everyone can play center. It's just kind of like a different mindset to it. So I think Tanner Berlini could be, and again, beautiful thing is he doesn't have to come in and be the guy. We can let him develop. And if Mitch Morse is good this year, he can take over for him. If Mitch Morse is good this year, he can take over. And if Mitch Morse is good this year, sorry, he can maybe take over for Brandon Scherf. But if Brandon Scherf is good year, maybe he can take over for Mitch Morse if Mitch Morse isn't as good. So that's another option as well that I would be fine with, because he can also play tackle as well. But it would be nice to have like, kind of a bona fide tackle in Christian Jones. And our next pick, 116, is going to be a bona fide guard. And that is Our guard is going to be Zach Zinter. So Zach Zinter is from Michigan, from that same Wolverines team that Aiden Hutchinson came from. And Jim Harbaugh is the kind of guy that loves to run the ball. And so Zach Hinter is obviously very, very familiar with that. And I think he would be a fantastic addition. Right now, the only knock on him, Bucky Barnes has him rated as his fourth, fifth best guard in the NFL, and in the draft coming out, which is, really good because there's a lot of good guards that are going to be coming out, a lot of good offensive linemen. And I think Zinter, his only knock is his health, right? So like he could be a first round or second round talent, but again, people don't draft guys in the first and second round if they're not going to start. So since he's wouldn't be starting because he's hurt, if teams got to pass on him and go for someone else that can come in, even if they need a guard, they have to go get someone who can play right away, even if they might not be as good as Zinter, or if Zinter can potentially be better. So because we've got the guard situation right now, we have two starters there. Like I said, no matter how good they are, we have two starters there. Zinter can come in, sit, learn, and also be a depth piece, right? So if one of those guys gets down, gets injured, which again, usually injuries happen towards the end of this, toward later on in the season when guys have been playing for a long time and their bodies are starting to give out on them and starting to hurt. So this would be the kind of guy that could come in maybe halfway through the season if Scherf or Cleveland goes down. And in theory, Zinter will be, he won't be as banged up by then. And also, those give him a lot of time to learn, develop, and use some of those punishing skills. I mean, look at him just blowing open holes in the run game. Like that's the exact kind of offensive lineman that we need. Um, and I think it'll be a great addition. Yeah. So that's my pick for the fourth round, Zach Zinter. And like I said, I like Tanner Bortolini, but I think I would rather have, Christian Jones just because he is a tackle. You know what I mean? And Zach Zinter is a guard, right? And then like next year, we can worry about getting someone who is a center. It's putting a lot of faith in Mitch Morse, but with how bad Luke Fortner was, it's kind of like, I mean, all you can do is go from up. Like, as long as he's just better than Luke Fortner, as long as he can hold a guy like Grover Stewart one on one, like Luke Fortner couldn't. Like Grover Stewart is good, don't get me wrong, but he's not. I don't know why that name won't come to me of the other Colts. DeForest Buckner. Jesus, man. Yeah, Grover Stewart's good, but he's not DeForest Buckner. Like, I can understand if Luke Fortner was struggling against DeForest Buckner, but like, he wasn't just struggling with Grover Stewart. Stewart was literally just throwing him around, right? Mitch Morse is not going to let Grover Stewart throw him around. Now, again, DeForest Buckner, Mitch Morse, and Brandon Sheriff might have to team up for him. And in that case, Everson Cleveland would have to deal with Grover Stewart, in that situation. And I think he's good enough to do so. But again, we have Zach Zinter waiting in the wings who can take over for Sheriff next year. If Cleveland ends up being really bad, he can maybe take over for Cleveland. But either way, this is a guy that I would love for us to pick up in the fourth round because he doesn't have to do it right away, but he will become a phenomenal starter for us. Next, we have Will Richard. I think his name might be Will Richard. And he's a kicker. And again, there's not a whole lot of mock drafts that have us drafting a kicker. But we need a kicker. I mean, I'm sorry, but last year we lost a lot of games because we couldn't get that right kick. You know what I mean? Like we couldn't the game against the Bengals. I'm pretty sure Brandon McManus, he missed a field goal earlier in the game, and that's why we lost, Same thing and we only lost by 3 points. Again, if we win that game, we make the playoffs. That's how big these little seemingly things are. And so Will Richard, his leg isn't as strong as some of the other guys like Cam Little, but he's accurate. 88 yards. He's making a 52-yarder here. 52 yards in the NFL. That's a good, and it didn't look like it took that much. Like he still had some room when he did that. 33-yarder. That's going to be a chip shot for him as he's doing right here. So 52 yards is enough leg strength for the NFL. And he can compete with, I can't remember who we signed. I think it was the guy from because we were supposed to get Will Lutz. Had we been able to get a deal with Will Lutz, that would have been much better. And Trent Baalke made the right move because we thought Brandon McManus was going to kind of be that kicker. Like this is something that contending teams do, and he just in the biggest moments he ended up, crashing. Um, again, we would have won the game against the Bengals if he had made a couple of those kicks. So that's where Will Richard comes in. Like I said, made 88% of his kicks, so he's accurate. He can hit from 50 yards, which, like I said, 52 yards, usually that's pretty much field goal range in the NFL if you can get your kicker to be in that range. So he'd be a good choice for us. Here he is making a tackle on a guy running the ball back, which with these new rules, we might need him to help out with that too. So clearly he's versatile. And a lot of people might frown at taking a kicker in the fifth round, especially when there are other guys to take. My thing is, again, kicker, it has a big impact in the NFL. There's we lost enough games because of our kicking strategy to not say, hey, let's double up. We signed a guy, let's draft a guy and have them compete. And we can wait till the fifth round. But I mean, some teams like they take kickers. I mean, you can get a Brandon Aubrey like the Dallas Cowboys did undrafted, and he just ends up being super good, one of the best kickers in the NFL. Or you can be like the 49ers and just not take a chance and draft a guy in the third round, which they did with Jake Moody. Of course, the Browns took Cade York a couple years ago in the fourth round, and that didn't end up working out. But for me, the fifth round, this seems about right. Like, I think we've already addressed our depth for our offensive linemen because we're not really passing on anything here. You know what I mean? Like, next up, we're just taking developmental prospects after this, the sixth and seventh round. So I think the fifth round is the right spot for us to take a kicker because we've got our backups, we've got um, some of our guys that we want to kind of develop into starters, and then these next guys are kind of like just trying to shoot and are just kind of trying to see if you can get magic in a bottle, and just see if they develop into, like Travis Kelce, who's taken in like the sixth round or something like that. So this is where I take the kicker. Will Richard, again, sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. But yeah, that's who we're taking in the fifth round at pick number 153. So next up, we have Jawan Briggs at 212. Jawan Briggs, he's a defensive tackle from Cincinnati. Last year he had 27 tackles and 2 sacks, which is not bad for a seventh rounder. There's higher rated guys that don't have those same stats. And like I said, he's a developmental guy. He can kind of clog up the middle of the lanes when we need him to. And again, it's more just for developmental and also having a little bit more depth at our defensive tackle position. Because if, someone goes down or something like that, we need a guy that can come step in and play that for us. So yeah, so that's Jawan Briggs. But we be taking him at number 212 in the sixth round. Here at this part in the sixth round, I also wouldn't mind if we went center instead. Maybe took a center that kind of fell or slipped off the board. If we could get one that, if Tanner Bortolini ends up falling to 212, that would be a fantastic spot to take him. I don't know if I don't know if he will, but like Antonio Johnson was graded as like a second round, third round talent, and he fell all the way to the fifth. So that's another thing I'm looking at. If Tanner Bortolini is a guy who's there at 212, yeah, I would take him. I would take him right here. And there's other centers that we could take. I ended the draft by taking Kingsley Egwakon. Egwakon, I believe is how you say his name, at number 236. And he is a center out of Florida. He was a center for the Florida Gators. Um, and I think the knock on him is just probably doesn't quite have the right size for the NFL, so he's going to need to kind of bulk up, kind of get a little bit better, in a lot of different areas. And again, this is kind of like a lightning in the bottle pick. See if this guy, if he can put in the work and kind of become that guy, then that would be great for our team because we'd have a center who could take over for Mitch Morse. And again, when you take a guy in the seventh round, if he's not ready this next year to take over for Mitch Morse, that's okay. He's still on the contract. But if we think he's trending in the right direction, we could give him another year. And if he takes over as our center in a couple of years, well, that's okay. That's good. That is a successful seventh round pick. if he takes, even if he takes 2 years to really develop into a guy. So here's him going one on one with the defensive tackle, and he gets a little bit of help from the guard. But either way, that was pretty good protection all around. There's that snap. He just blew open a nice little hole for the running back to get closer to the goal line. So again, he has some skills. He's got stuff that we could work with if we take him. So it would just kind of be a guy who could potentially develop and into that, who could potentially develop into the starter down the line. And again, if he never does, that's okay. Again, it was a developmental prospect. So um, there's a couple of things that I kind of, I don't want to say ignored, but like I saw a lot of mock drafts that double up at cornerback and wide receiver in the later rounds. To me, if I'm taking Quinyon Mitchell and Xavier Legate in the first and second round, to kind of get those premier ones, like I said, if I'm looking at our wide receivers, and I'm assuming that we're going to have six, that would be Christian Kirk, um, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Gabriel Davis, Xavier Legate, Parker Washington, and Devin Duvernay. To me, that's a solid receiving core. Um, and eventually, Xavier Legate would kind of take over for Zay Jones. Gabe Davis would kind of play Zay Jones's role, and then Xavier Legate would kind of be that outside guy. So Zay Jones would be more of a depth piece. And we maybe would move on from him this season. So maybe we'd have to draft another guy next year or sign another guy. But either way, I think that's pretty good. Especially if we especially because we still have some undrafted guys who have been in our roster for a while. Elijah Cooks and Tim Jones could also potentially make the roster. And if I'm looking at our cornerback room, I mean, we still got there's a bunch of cornerbacks that we took in last year's draft that never did anything because they were hurt the whole year. I think Elijah Hallett, um, something Hallett, something Hallett, Christian Braswell we took, and he didn't end up doing anything. So there's still some developmental guys that we could see, going into year two. Again, you don't have to like put your faith in them, but you don't have to give up on them either. To me, I'm like, I got my big three, and that would be Quinion Mitchell, Tyson Campbell, and Ronald Darby. And Ronald Darby would kind of, and we could even keep him, like we don't have to release him next year because he's on such a cheap deal. It's a fantastic deal um by a bulky 5 years. I mean, not 5 years, 5 million per year for the next 2 years. That's perfect. So we keep him, and he can be our backup for if Mitchell or Tyson Campbell goes down either this year or next. And he can also play that role of filling in the veteran spot while Quinyon Mitchell kind of gets up to speed. Or again, if it's Terry and Arnold, while he gets up to speed. So I think our cornerback room would be fine. Because like I said, Monteric Brown came in and played some games, and he was all right. I don't know if I'd like him as the number 3 outside corner, but he's still there. Apparently, we're gonna have Darnell Savage play nickel, which kind of makes more sense than have Antonio Johnson just be back there in the Rayshawn Jenkins role. And I think Antonio Johnson will be. I think Antonio Johnson can kind of do a Kyle Hamilton for us. I think he could have been that because Kyle Hamilton plays safety for the Ravens, but on nickel packages, he comes in and guards the slot. Like if we take a defensive tackle out, they put him in the slot and then they bring in another guy. That's when they brought in Geno Stone to play, and that's why he got his position. So to me, like Andrew Wingard, probably I wouldn't want him to be the guy that's coming in every time we move Antonio Johnson into the slot. And Antonio Johnson is only in his second year, so I don't know if that would kind of be overwhelming for him to be consistently moving around. But if it's a thing that we thought he could do, I mean, it kind of renders Darnell Savage kind of redundant. But he's here and he's going to play the slot for us. So I think Antonio Johnson will be a better safety than Savage, and I think he'll be at least as good as Rayshawn Jenkins, if not a little bit better. So I think those positions are worked out. So that's partly why I didn't take a safety. Because like I said, if Antonio Johnson goes down, Savage can still play safety. We still have Andrew Wingard, who this podcast is kind of named after, and we still have guys like Daniel Thomas, who's primarily a special teamer, but he can still get after it if need be. So yeah, so I really tried to build out our depth in the trenches. And take some developmental prospects in there throughout the later rounds of the draft. Like if you look after I took Mitchell and Legate, who you could kind of consider a skill position, every other pick was a trenches pick besides the kicker. every other pick. So I'm very aware that the Jaguars need to work on the trenches, and I completely agree. I think we need some depth and we need some guys that could potentially take over. That's what I'm seeing from what we've done in free agency, and that's what I'm seeing from the draft. So let me know your thoughts. Who did you want to take in each round? Do you agree with my picks? And I guess it'll all go down starting tonight. So there's only one way to see for sure what exactly happens. So thank you guys for rocking with me. And until next time, remember, it was always the Jags. Always the Jags.